Welcome to the Unzipped Mind. My name is Nick Smith. I'm here with Greg Minikis and Dylan Jessen.
Hello.
Hey guys.
Hey.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for coming out again. And we're going to talk about anxiety today.
A very relevant topic for most of us, for most of our lives. All three of us have discussed at length how we have some anxiety about various things. It's definitely become a more prevalent issue, I'd say. I'm sure you've all seen studies that depression and anxiety rates have been rising steadily. There's theories that attribute it to social media or like certain parenting choices, but there's definitely a lot that we three can say about this topic for our personal lives.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think it's so relatable too. And I think, like you said, it kind of bleeds into a lot of other issues and problems that, derives from anxiety.
Yeah, well, I think even further than just like social, I think the natural like political maps of the world right now and how the shape of things right now and what people are seeing causes, or it could be a cause towards the rise in those numbers of like people who are feeling anxious or depressed on a more regular basis. You know what I mean?
There's a lot to say on the subject. It is definitely, this is a more clinical topic than we've done in the past, or at least that we three have done in the past without a guest who's a licensed therapist. So it's definitely worth saying that, again, this is not a therapy podcast, so we are not going to be offering therapeutic advice. We're not, the point of this the intent of this podcast isn't to do therapy. We also, like, our opinions may be more uninformed than somebody who has like a master's degree or who has like a lot of expertise in the field. And you know what? I'm okay with that because that's the kind of podcast we are. Like the three of us, we work in mental health. We see a lot of anxiety. We have insights about our own anxiety, but like this is just going to be us talking about it, processing,
sharing our experiences,
sharing our own experiences.
It's unique in its own sense, and it allows people to kind of relate to, I'm sure you've had different forms of anxiety that Dylan has and I have as well. And I'm even still in my life understanding what anxiety is.
Same, Nick, you post you have in the past posted semi-regularly about your own anxiety and that you're kind of on a journey yourself, kind of figuring it out, learning how to process it. So do you want to talk about your own experience first?
Yeah. To comment on that, I do post, and they are usually when, it's kind of, I'm being insightful on how I'm feeling or what I'm going through or sections of my life is very anxiety ridden, and it's kind of how I've processed it. It's kind of writing about it and posting about it, and kind of being transparent. But it has been journeying. Like I said, it's still a journey. Like I think it's only been the most recent few years that I've even understood that how I've been feeling or how my mind works in certain ways is anxiety.
Right. You've only just recently identified your feelings. You were aware of the feelings, but you maybe didn't have a label for them.
I guess it was just like, that's just how my mind worked is kind of my thought. But and anxiety at its core, to my understanding at a core, is all things that haven't happened. It's riddled in fear and what ifs and worst case scenarios that kind of build off each other, at least for me.
And anxiety can take a lot of different forms. I feel you in that there was a long period where I also didn't realize that I was anxious, but my anxiety was purely social anxiety. So it wasn't that I was consciously thinking. I'm not even sure if I was having thoughts. It was just the feeling of anxiety was making me hyper vigilant in social situations about other people's behavior, about my own behavior. And then that kind of state of hypervigilance was creating a tension that prevented me from being myself, from sort of letting my authentic self flow. There were also some other things that I wasn't dealing with at the time that I can get into. But so it was different in that it wasn't like, I wasn't filled with thoughts necessarily, but like I had a persistent thought, which was, I am not doing this right. I'm not doing social situations right. I'm not doing eye contact right. I'm not doing conversations right. And so that constant hypervigilance just made me very uptight and like, not fun to be around. And then realizing that I wasn't being fun to be around would make me even more anxious. So it was like a vicious cycle in that way.
Just to finish on that, I really relate to that. And I feel like there's different sections of my anxiety, but
is it a very broad landscape? Is it a very multicolored landscape for you?
It is, but I didn't. Same as a handful of years, work so long in our acute, psychiatric setting and in a crisis unit where you are constantly having to pay attention to behaviors and constantly having to kind of be on edge in a sense and pay attention to everything. That I realized that I would be going in a social situation or a group kind of situation, and I couldn't relax because I was constantly evaluating people's behaviors and people, and then my own responses and stuff. So I really relate to that.
Let me hit you both, since you both just brought up that wonderful.
Sock it to me, buddy.
Yeah. Do you guys feel like with that perception in social situations that you were misinterpreting other people's behaviors or other people's reactions to your interactions or your behaviors, and then that made it worse for you?
Probably. It's the kind of thing where like it's not like I ever was asking people like, hey, so like all these thoughts that I have about your little micro cues and your little micro expressions, like are those accurate? Like I never got to have those conversations. But in retrospect, yeah, probably I probably was misinterpreting. Like the classic is the way that a person's behaving. You think that it's because they don't like you, when in fact there could be an endless number of reasons that they're behaving. Like maybe this person's just having a bad day. So like they're looking at me with kind of like what I consider to be a cold expression or like a lack of interest or lack of respect, when in fact this person's just so preoccupied with the bad day that they had that's as good as I'm going to get for that. That's as much warmth as they can even give me in that moment right now. And it has nothing to do with me or my behavior. Okay. So probably. What about you? What do you think?
Yeah, and what is that? You mentioned it the other day, Dylan, but when you're like looking for certain negatives, that's all that you're going to see. You're looking for certain traits.
The negativity bias that's a phenomenon in like social psychology.
Yeah,
maybe.
I think that's the same. I'm thinking it's just like when you get a car, right? Like a certain car, and then you see that car everywhere. Yeah. But especially with anxiety, I'm always thinking the worst, or I'm thinking that I'm saying something wrong, or that someone's behavior is because of me in some way, and then you're looking for supporting.
It's almost like a confirmation bias.
It's confirmation bias. That's what I was looking for.
Yeah, it's I would say it's like negativity bias and like a confirmation bias. Where
it's like kind of combination.
Yeah, where you have a perception or a thought that this person is seeing my behaviors or they're interpreting what I'm talking about or doing one way, and then they act or do something that for you that's just confirming everything. And then you're like, well, see, I was right.
Right. Since you have this sort of preconceived thought that like everyone or like people in general react negatively to me, then you're seeing little piece of evidence for that everywhere.
Yeah, it's all you're going to pick up instead of the positivity or the comfortability that you provide people. You're just going to pick up on the behaviors that you're acknowledging, because you're gonna subconsciously or consciously, but you're going to take the other behaviors that don't resonate and you're going to chalk those up to other exterior or other influences, and that's not going to be for you. It's a feature that helped us, right?
It was adaptive.
Now it is a maladaptive.
Yes, now it's maladaptive.
Right? Yep. Because of how we've evolved. And like same thing, about the topic with anxiety too. It's like it serves a purpose, like a general level or an understanding of anxiety serves a purpose.
It's a signal.
It's a signal that something's not right in the environment and that you need to be more aware. And like what you were just saying, like you find yourself in social situations, or you used to find yourself in social situations.
Yeah, definitely less so now, but
with anxiety, you were hyper aware. You didn't go into it consciously hyper aware, but because of your anxiety, you became hyper aware of stuff. Yeah. Right. So that serves a survival purpose. But now let's just be real and frank and call it what it is. Anxiety like sucks. It sucks ass. It's crippling. It's not fun to deal with, and it makes it really difficult to deal with some situations and deal with conversations and interacting with your day-to-day life. That's when, for me, that's when the general evolved anxiety of like, this is typical, because we all, whether you have diagnosed anxiety disorder or not, we have all felt anxiety. We've all felt anxious.
Yeah, I would definitely say that too.
Yeah, at some point in our lives, there's times like I think all of us have moments. I think if we all listeners, everybody just closed our eyes and thought back to when we were a child, we've all had a shared experience. That one time, that first time where you either let go of your parents' hands or you were in a public place and you looked around and you couldn't see anybody that you knew. That's dread.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, welcome to anxiety.
That's anxiety, right? You are anxious, but you're anxious for the right reasons. You lost your home people, right? You lost your safety net.
Let's stay here for a second. The sort of natural and adaptive anxiety. So like sometimes, so we work at a psychiatric hospital. Most days are peaceful and beautiful, and we have great conversation with our patients. But sometimes there's someone there who often is in psychosis, and they are violent. And so some of our violent patients, so we have a very kind of, I think, progressive and humane approach to violence, which is like, just because someone is yelling or threatening doesn't mean that we put our hands on them, which I think is better mental health care.
Yeah.
But so because of that, we're not just like, as soon as someone starts yelling, we don't just like wrap them up and, inject them full of drugs and throw them in a seclusion room like they do in a lot of places in this country. Yeah. So
4-point restraints are still used. Regularly. And it is so inhumane.
Yeah. It is. So there are some times when there's someone who's walking around the unit who's very psychotic, who's refusing meds, who has maybe been violent before, or who is consistently threatening violence, and we have to be there in the hallway, hanging out with the other patients, just waiting, hopefully for them to calm down, or waiting for the opportunity for us to bridge the gap and form a relationship and a friendship. But sometimes that moment doesn't come, or it doesn't come for days. And so for all those days, we are sitting there anxious.
Yeah.
So
Heightened.
that's 12 hours of anxiety that we can't avoid because we have to be there, and it is an unsafe situation for us. And it's definitely safer than if we had no backup staff. We have plenty of staff who are great and who are well trained and compassionate. So like, we got backup, but still we got to be there, and like, it could pop off at any moment. So that's like a natural form of anxiety.
And I imagine that's even just working in the field, right? And even if it wasn't as much of a crisis situation as it usually, or a crisis kind of setting, I could imagine anxiety just doesn't turn off when we go home, right? So I imagine the years that we go through that, and the amount of days that we are in a constant baseline anxiety state, that bleeds into our regular life as well.
Yeah.
And just kind of amplified because our brains are just used to being in that anxiety state.
100%.
Analyzing.
Yeah, when I was full time and I was working like mostly in sort of an acute situations, dude, I like could not pretty much ever shake my anxiety. I was a wreck. I also didn't have a lot of support at that time. Like I was just a wreck in a variety of ways, but yeah.
There's some aspects of PTSD that I've wondered, through the anxiety is like, in public situations, I really attribute it, with military, right? Like military, typically they're sitting in the back corner of the room so that they can observe the whole environment and not have open space that, can be surprised from behind. And I have that same kind of feeling, like anytime I go in a restaurant or anything, it's not from like a fear of, like a physical attack or anything like that, but it's observing the environment. It's not having all the information, and I definitely attribute that to our job over the years. But
and so, that part of that is an adaptive skill. Like it's all about how you feel about it.
That's
so
true. That's true.
Like as a, I've been practicing martial arts for a long time. And so I do try to like keep my situational awareness in mind. I do like to sit in the corners, and I do like to know where my exits are and stuff like that. But I don't feel anxious about it. It's just kind of like almost like a game. Like every time I enter a place, I'm just like, oh, where are my exits? How can I get like a nice position where I don't feel like where I don't have like my back open? And it's like, I don't know, I play a lot of video games too, so it doesn't feel that serious to me, since I don't have like a trauma history of being attacked or anything. But like but I don't feel anxious about that, whereas like if it's coming from a place of anxiety, I could see that being like kind of burdensome.
Well, to stay with that too, it's something, talking about units, right, and talking about what we kind of see a lot of, and talking about situational anxiety or like situational anxiousness, and also like your normal anxiousness to diagnosed anxiety and other things, right? Your baseline anxiousness. But the other thing that we see a lot of, like you were bringing up our anxiety, like our personal anxiety, especially when we have patients who keep us on an edge for a very good reason. Like we're on edge because we are trying to bridge a gap. Like you said it really well. We're on edge because we're trying to bridge a gap. We're trying to give this individual the best care that they can have at that moment.
In a situation where something really bad could happen almost at any time, and we got to be ready for it.
Yeah, well, and we're also managing many different personalities and disorders in general, right? Because it's not just one person we're working with.
Right.
So you're managing this individual who, that is a learned behavior. This is how they're dealing with their stress. This is whatnot. So I'm not saying that's wrong or anything, but because they're doing this behavior, they're acting this way. We have people who, and like Nick Angry, you guys brought up like past traumas infecting those. We have other patients who come through traumatic backgrounds or whatnot, and the sole act of somebody who is using this kind of behavior causes them to have anxiety. So we're managing, and I think, going off of like not being able to shut it down right off when we get off work or something either. I think that's another aspect of it, is because while in the workspace, it's not my, like, I keep my stuff manageable, right? Because I'm there working. There is this baseline anxiousness when we have a situation kind of like that, where we just got to be aware, we're watching, we're making sure nothing's escalating further, or we're trying to connect around that. So there's this baseline anxiousness, right? But we're not concerned about ours. It's an understanded,
it's an acceptance.
It's an accepted part of our role.
We have no choice but to live in that moment, to exist in that moment with the anxiety.
Yeah.
Like, we can't take care of it. We can't do the things that would help us in other situations to eliminate our anxiety or reduce it. Like, oh, I'm going to go take a hot bath and chill and watch some TV or something.
Yeah.
We have to just stay there sitting with the anxiety for 12 hours.
For a little while.
For weeks.
And we're focused on reducing the anxiety of the other patient, like of our other patients, of the people who are being triggered or who are being affected by the other behaviors. We're concerned about that anxiety, so we want to take care of that. So sometimes I will say, like, sometimes even just doing that will help reduce what I'm going through, like, at that moment. But understanding, like, what is going on in that behavior in itself, whether it's learned or whatnot, in that essence, I see that as anxiety as well, right? Because they're acting like that way because they're feeling a way. It could be something else, but they're feeling that way because, like, let's be real, to be hospitalized, whether you are in an inpatient facility, whether you are at an emergency room or in one of the psych wards of a hospital, no matter what kind of psych ward you go in, your stuff is removed from you. Right? For obvious reasons, right? There is obvious reasons for that.
Can't keep shoelaces or anything with
self-harms and stuff like that. And we as staff members, like, when we go travel to other hospitals and we are with our patients in those hospitals, even when we go into those units, we have to surrender all of our personal belongings as well.
I've never been in a psych unit in, like, a medical hospital.
Yeah. So, like, I mean, just for backstory on that, right? Like, even when I'm, chauffeuring is not the correct word. When I'm
escorting.
Thank you. Thank you so much. When I'm escorting a patient and I'm with them and we are medically dealing with something medical, and they are choosing to move that patient to the psych ward. And when they do that move, I also have to surrender all my stuff because I'm going on to the unit with the patient, right?
Damn, that's hardcore.
Even for me, it's like, is my stuff gonna be okay?
Yeah.
Anybody gonna go through it? Why can't I have my stuff? Like, I'm an adult. I'm a grown ass person. So,
and you're asking those questions as a staff member, but every patient asks the same questions. Like, why are you taking my stuff? Yeah.
It feels, and exactly. And especially with the population that we tend to work with a lot of times the stuff we're taking isn't stuff, first of all, to them. It's literally all they have.
Yeah.
And they just want to make sure that it's safe. They don't know where they're going, all this other stuff. There's all these added on exterior pressures that are causing them to feel these ways, right? And instead of just talking about, oh, this person's loud, they're just aggravated, like, that is a sign of anxiety. And that's, I think, another really important piece of anxiety. It does not present, like, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, right? I feel like when we talk about anxiety, or when anxiety is brought up in a public space, the general public's imagination or imagery of anxiety is the person who is restless, the person who is fidgeting,
leg shaking,
foot shaking. Breathing maybe, like, really rapidly, right? Like your common run-of-the-mill anxiety, visible anxiety. Or I think what gets missed when we're talking about anxiety is the other signs of it, the other expressions of anxiety, that it has so many different outlets that it looks like.
Well, so there's, I mean, in our training, in our de-escalation training, we spend a lot of time on this topic, especially in a sort of treatment setting in a psychiatric hospital. The squeaky wheel gets the grease. The person who is visibly anxious, who is communicating their anxiety to staff, who's obviously looks anxious, they're fidgeting or whatever, hanging out by the nurse station, fidgeting, tapping, like, they will get immediate attention because they're right there on their face, like, oh, hey, you seem anxious, what's going on, what can I do for you? Whereas there could be someone who is as anxious or much more anxious, laying in bed, not moving.
Yeah, it's overlooked.
Because they're just, and what's crazy is they're anxious about asking for help.
Even if they're not anxious about asking for help, they may just be totally tormented by some kind of anxiety, and they're not showing it. So then we may not know until that situation blows up. Either the person is angry and anxious, and their anxiety just blows up and they maybe do something violent, or it could go in the opposite direction. Maybe their anxiety reaches a breaking point and then they want to hurt themselves.
Like, do you think that anger explosion, or like when we have patients who are like that, right? That side of anxiety, not the very verbal, loud style. Do you think we see that blow up because they're feeling continuously unheard?
I mean, yeah, it could be. I mean, we get a lot of people who are anxious just about external life circumstances. So maybe there's like a divorce happening, or like maybe they had some kind of crisis, maybe a suicide attempt or a manic episode. They got taken into custody by police initially because maybe they were doing something irrational. They had a suicide attempt, and now they're worried about maybe losing their job. They're worried about maybe being late on like a rent payment, and then they're also angry at us for holding them. They're angry at us. They're angry at the system. They're put on a hold now, so they're angry and they're anxious at the same time. And then so for that person, he may have. This person may have more resentment that could kind of build up and blow up into, attack on us or an attack on another patient, versus the person who isn't really angry at all, but is just consumed with worry because of something or another. So it can definitely go, can go either way.
I kind of want to comment on something you said a little bit ago, Please. Greg.
Bring it back.
Yeah, because and like you said, Dylan, with our job, and I think that's one thing that makes us good at our job is that we are anxious about, because we're trying to make sure everybody's safe. We're trying to make sure that everybody's taken care of, that we can address whatever needs.
We're anxious because we care.
Because we care, exactly.
We're trying to do our best job possible.
Right. Instead of, if we didn't care, I'm sure our anxiety would be much more reduced, because we would just have that block up and and not have that compassion, or would it be in the right field? I'll tell you that.
Yeah, probably not a great choice.
But what you said
early
on, Greg, is you presented the question of, is it, I forgot how you worded it, but basically, is it a skill, or is it, anxiety, is it detrimental? And that's something I kind of toying with, is because a heavy part of my anxiety is internal, right? I have social anxiety, sure, which I've talked about, but most of it is internal. Most of it is my own analyzing and my own behavior, my own life, it just compiles.
Is it sorry to interrupt, Nick. Yeah. Do you think that's because you're talking about the internal side of your things, right? Obviously, do you think it's negative self-talk that you've just perpetuated, or that's causing that anxiety? Or do you think it's not, because you're analyzing so intently?
Because it's not usually riddled with negativity. Okay. It's the overanalyzing, I think, and then creating scenarios that
don't exist.
That don't exist, and then branching off of those scenarios, and then it continues to branch off, and then it plays in. Then you feel it's like having a dream, like a horrible nightmare, and you don't remember it, but you feel the emotion. Yeah, that's the same. So what I was going with that is,
sorry about that.
Also, that could be looked at as a skill, right? To a certain degree, analyzing everything, every conversation, every stress, every visual cues. Just anything. It's over analyzing. But on the other end of the spectrum, if I was kind of going through life with just blinders and not doing that self-reflection and not making those changes, sure, my anxiety might be much more reduced, but look at the product of my life that might be much different, and so it can be looked at both ways. Obviously, it can get out of control with the amount of analyzing.
That's what it comes down to. Being analytical is not a bad thing.
I think the worst part is my habit with it. I spend 12 hours, 13 hours, whatever, trying to help other people's anxiety, and then don't process my own thoughts and anxiety until a couple hours before I go to bed. Yeah, and so everything's kind of grouped into one little.
Which everybody knows that's the perfect time to analyze your entire day.
Yeah, to ruminate.
To ruminate on your entire day.
Let's start from the first conversation when I woke up.
Yeah, right away, right off the bat. Dude, I empathize so much with what you were just saying, because I do have social anxiety, right, and that became very apparent when I became clean, right? But the rumination I've always dealt with, and I want to do some more of my personal research too. And if any professionals out there or want to come and talk to us about it, or has any information on this that they could direct us to, I wonder what the correlation between ADHD and anxiety is.
I was just going to ask you that.
Right? I really do, because I ruminate and overanalyze every conversation I have, and on also too, my actions in social situations. to the point, even not even so with private interaction, like with my fiance, there's times where I can't sleep or whatnot because I'm like, did I overreact to that? Was that an overreact? Did I word that correctly? And there's times where, especially like if we're using the context of our work, right?
Yeah.
There's times too where I'm just over analyzing like what you're just saying the entire day. Like, could I have helped in a different way? Could I have worded that differently that would have been more received? Or how could I have done this and this and this? And it's that woulda, coulda, shoulda thing.
Yeah.
There's interactions I have with friends, with family, with just acquaintances and stuff where I'll ruminate on it. I'm like, I should apologize or, I should clarify something or I should do this. And I will like either write a text out or look at my phone and look at their name and be like, how should I word it? Do I really, are they thinking about it? And then I just start going down this hole where I'm like, is this actually necessary? Am I going to make it worse? And it just becomes this,
you almost forget where the baseline was.
Yeah, I just became anxious explaining it.
Yeah.
First of all, and like, dude, I do this regularly.
Yeah. Me too.
Right, regularly, and it's not because an hour goes by. You're like, what did I just do?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that is one factor. Like, what did you do? Like, what was the content of that hour that you just spent? Because in my experience, if I'm not talking to someone about it, if I'm not talking to a therapist or to a friend, it's just me going in circles.
Yeah.
I'm going in circles. I'm not really coming to any positive conclusions because it is adaptive to be aware of how we're talking to other people and to critically analyze our behavior. Cause like, I want to improve. I want to be the best friend I can be. I want to be the best, when I've been in a relationship, I want to be the best partner I can be. I want to be the best, tech that I can be. I want to be the best at my job that I can be. And so it is good to critically analyze, but like, if it's just you in your head over and over just thinking the same things, it ends up being an hour of unproductive thought.
But that's what I wonder.
Extremely unproductive.
Yeah.
So, and that's what I wonder if ADD or ADHD plays into that, because I feel like, personally, that plays into the inability or the more difficult to stop that hamster wheel.
Yeah. From the years that I've been in therapy, my process with stuff like that is I have a thought. Let's say I said something to someone that I thought was awkward or that I thought was insensitive. So then I will usually talk with someone about it and process using the other person's perspective. And then I'm just going to write it down and then I'm going to just leave it alone. Yeah. And then once I've written it,
writing does help.
Write down the conclusion. It's like, cause I could spend all day thinking about, should I have said this? What would be an alternative? But until I get it down on paper or like in a notepad on my phone, I won't have a conclusion and I can just keep spinning forever.
Yeah.
And then I won't be able to sleep and then I won't be able to focus. Or I'll like be unsure about how to approach the person the next time I see them. And I don't want to be like that. I want to be calm and confident in all my interactions if I can be. So yeah, I mean, talking with someone so it's not just you ruminating in circles in your own head, so that you can kind of bounce the idea off the person, kind of clarify your own thoughts, and then writing it down. And then once it's written down, putting it away and just, I'm not going to think about this.
It's done.
Yeah.
It's done. And then if I start to think about it, I'd be like, nope, I already know what I thought.
Yeah, I took care of that.
Yeah, took care of it.
That is a wonderful coping skill, and I might steal that from you.
I don't think it's just me. I think there's probably some evidence.
Well, I know, but you presented it, so it's you who I'm stealing it from.
Steal away.
But I might try that because that's something where I struggle with a lot. Because dude, there's nights where I should and I want to be sleeping. You know what I mean? But
You're exhausted.
Yeah, I cannot for the life of me shut it down. I will just be ruminating.
Yeah.
And I don't write things down, right? I used to draw, but I don't write things down. And my typical way that I used to cope with that was my like mountain biking and my fly fishing, my outdoor stuff. And not to say Portland doesn't have that, right? Like I do love this city. It's amazing the access we have.
Yeah, great access, but not compared to living in a tiny mountain town.
Yeah. I can't ride from my door to trails, right? You know what I mean? So that's one aspect of it. But I love that you use, like, that's what your coping skills and that's what you found works for you. And I love that you brought up using your therapist, right?
Yeah.
Because friends are amazing. And when you have really good friends and
smart friends, hopefully.
And
thank you.
Yeah. And
you guys are great to
the
talk
other
about.
thing too is though non-biased friends. Friends who are going to be honest with you.
They won't just take your side.
Friends who are non-biased who are like, well, your thought process there is a little messed up. But
puts you in check a little bit.
Yeah. who will play devil's advocate when you need it, right? That's really important. But with therapists, you have a paid, non-biased soundboard.
Yeah.
Right. And
Trained
soundboard who can, if you need it, just a soundboard, they can be that for you. If you just need to belch out whatever thoughts are there, they're there for that. If you need constructive feedback of like, am I being neurotic about this? They're paid to be like, you are.
I have definitely asked that exact question. Like, am I just thinking myself in a hole about this? Like, please tell me, therapist. And they'll usually tell me.
But what, the other things that you're saying really resonate as well. Cause one of the things that I've dealt with a lot of, and one of the things, and bringing it back to the connection between ADD and anxiety, I do know that one aspect of ADD and ADHD and whatnot, whatever, several other acronyms you want to add into or variations of ADD that exist, right? One of the typical traits is rejection, adverse response to rejection, right?
Like social rejection?
Yeah. Like where somebody who is maybe neurotypical can take that rejection and be like, oh, okay, well, I may have not been the best fit.
Not everybody gets along.
Yeah, not everyone gets along, or I may not have been the best fit for that, or whatever coping skill and or write-off you want to come up with, right? Fill in the blank there. But the aspect that I know, like personally, that I deal with my ADHD, and the one thing that I know is a trait is that rejection, and that it hits you really, really hard, right? And it's really hard to not ruminate and not be fixated on like, well, how can I make it so I'm not rejected?
Yeah.
Like, what did I do wrong, right? You really personalize that whether it was because like you may not have had the credentials or you may not have been the best fit for that, whatever, again, fill in the blank on that one. But I'm wondering if that is an aspect that builds upon the anxiety and that rumination part, where some of the social interactions that we have, or some of the even interactions that you have at work, right? Like personally, if I can't connect with a patient, if I can't find that road, that road that will help me bridge the gap that we're having, right? So I can provide the best care for that patient. It devastates me.
I'm the same way.
Yeah, whether it's our personalities are different, that I can, if that's the sole purpose and I can see it and it's known, I can write that off and be like, all right.
That's like the main factor, you mean?
Yeah, if that's the main factor, I'm like, cool. So I'm not the person to talk to that person, right? We just don't mesh.
Right.
But if it's an unknown reason, I just can't for the life of me solve that puzzle.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah.
It sits with me.
Because you can usually connect on some, whether it's just even a baseline respect. You know what I mean? There's at least there's maybe one or two patients I can think of specifically where I just could not find that connection over long, periods of time.
Weeks. Yeah. All three of us kind of abide by a certain narrative, which is that we are good at our job and we should be able to connect to most patients. Like, because we have in the past, we've been successful. So we think we have this narrative that like, I can probably connect with my patients. With most of my patients. So when that doesn't happen, when we're unable to connect, then there's this new narrative, which is like, I messed up, or I suck, or like I'm not as good at my job as I thought I was. So in my time working with CBT therapists, I really liked the idea of counter statements. So here's the initial narrative is I'm pretty good at my job and I can normally connect with my patients. That's I think a valid narrative. I hold to that. So now there's this new narrative. If I failed to connect, it's like I failed. I am not as good as maybe I'm not as good as I thought I was. So then I want to have a counter statement that I've sort of practiced. That's like that I can immediately pull out. So as soon as I start to go down the sad rabbit hole of, well, maybe I'm not as good as I thought I was, maybe I'm not really cut out for this work, I immediately remember the counter statement that I've sort of memorized. That's sort of like my immediate sort of counter to myself, which is, not everybody connects with everybody. And like there could be so many factors for why I didn't connect with this person. I can't, like, it's not worth it for me to dwell on this forever because there's nothing I can do about it. What's done is done. 12 hours are up. I'm already going home. Like somebody else hopefully will have a better.
I like with both of those statements, like what you do is you
is very helpful.
You call attention to it immediately. Whether it is talking it through or whether it is reminding yourself on that. And I think about my anxiety in my relationship, right? Like natural. Like that's where some of my anxiety lies. And what I've learned is
in like a romantic relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. In my relationship now, I've learned to kind of call attention to things that are just like, if it's just random anxiety that has no bias, I'll like bring it, or I'll just say, babe, I'm anxious, or like, ask a question or clarifying, or I try and address it immediately because like Dylan said, the more that I ruminate on it, then you create those scenarios or I think about interactions. Oh, maybe she's upset about this that I said or what have you.
And if it all stays in here, then after 3 hours of thinking about that, you haven't moved. You haven't
never
moved
gets better.
If anything, you go backwards.
So
yeah,
much
you might even
worse.
go backwards. And just like quality of life, like how many hours of our lives do we want to spend ruminating? Like, because if I'm ruminating, I'm definitely not enjoying my life. I'm certainly not sleeping. For me, the most important step is talking to somebody about it, because I can just get so trapped in my head, like, and then I never know the answer. But when I bounce this idea off of another human, then it really kind of grounds my perspective. It'll validate what I think, or it'll introduce like a very basic thing that I've just had blinders on and I haven't noticed. So that's a big, because we kind of exist in relation to other people.
Yeah, I've never had therapy. I probably should have at some point. Should probably start that, but I never have, and so I don't have that experience. But I think that's why I brought up this is at any relationship I've ever been in, the most transparent that I am ever been.
You and Haley?
Yeah,
that's
100%.
That's because she's awesome.
But it's the same thing, right? Like that's why I like things I'm anxious about, whether it's because it's past trauma or whatever that I've had, that I bring up when I have those emotions, and I'm trying to get more in the habit of doing that initially. And it does. It alleviates so much of that. So I can imagine therapy, how it has that same impact.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but like just also being transparent with the people in your life is like as important, because if you say everything to your therapist but you never open up to the people in your life, like then you're still kind of isolated in a way.
You're using that therapist as like a scapegoat, right? You're like, oh, well, all right, dealt with that situation.
Yeah, I already dealt with that, so I don't need to tell anyone any of my issues.
You don't actually deal with the root cause of your anxiety. And I just also want to touch on what Nick was saying too, because I really resonate with that, because in previous romantic relationships, right? Same, like, sure, I talked about a lot that y'all know me. I like to talk.
There's a certain layer, I'm sure, of transparency.
Exactly. It's transparent as I want to be.
You
right?
can kind of talk around the central issue.
Easy. Yeah, it's one of the
what you're comfortable with.
Yeah, it's one of the beautiful gifts of having a golden tongue. I don't want to talk about it, and I know how to talk around it.
Yeah. I also know how to talk around stuff.
But I made before the relationship I'm in right now with my wonderful fiance, right? Before this relationship, I made a conscious and I out loud to myself made a conscious promise that my next relationship was going to be healthy, and that I would not allow myself to be in a relationship that was not suitable for both partners, right? That was not a symbiotic relationship, right?
Balance.
It's really important. That's, I think, a really, really important part of it is you see these relationships where people are either codependent or they are manipulating, or what. There's so many other aspects, right? Let's call it what it is. It's a bad relationship.
Yeah.
So with my fiance McKenna, same thing. I've learned to be very transparent and very verbal and she also knows the cues. Like, we've been together we're in our 7th year, right? We've been together for a while. Thank you. She knows the cues, and she also knows what scenarios and situations where I'm going to be visibly or I'm going to be dealing with anxiety. And it's really interesting because one thing that I didn't know about myself, right, that she picked up on and informed me and like kind of addressed it is before my sober days, right? I would be described as a social butterfly, if you will, right? Like I had no problems being in a bar scene, in a social environment, and connecting with people and flowing around the room. In smaller groups, I still don't have that problem, right? I can flow around rooms, especially if I am comfortable and know, I would say, more than half the people there, right? But you put me in a space where I know very few people, there's a lot of people and all that stuff. I get so anxious.
Yeah, sure.
And I didn't realize I do this, but I shut down. Like I just block up. Like I can't be as engaged, and like what you were saying in the beginning, right? it's that off-putting kind of vibe, not necessarily off-putting, but like that closed off vibe. So then because I'm closed off, because I'm not being very communicative with the people around me,
it amplifies it.
It does. Because then I start seeing like all these people are socializing and talking with each other, but I'm still kind of over here in the corner. But then I'm like, oh, well, it's because no one knows me, and it's because I'm this new person. And then I just start.
One of those was a counterstatement. It's because no one knows me. Like, it's not really my fault. This doesn't reflect badly on my character. But it's hard to get out of that hole.
But for me though, where you see it as a counterstatement, which is, I think that's a really good reverbage of it. Because for me, how I see it is I see it as a negative. I don't see it as a counterstatement.
Well, maybe I was misunderstanding you. Like, if I'm like sitting in a corner of a room where everyone else seems to know each other, or at least everyone's vibing, I could go down the rabbit hole of like, I am socially dysfunctional.
Yeah.
There's something wrong with me. I don't know how to talk to people. But I have a counterstatement which is like, look, I don't know anybody, and I'm an introvert. So like, I'm temperamentally an introvert. It's not a bad thing. It's just the way I am. And then I don't know anybody. So how can I expect myself to be talking with all these people when it's like, I don't know anybody? So that's a counterstatement because it reduces my tendency to like kind of blame myself.
See, and that's where I have that issue is I continue to ruminate on it. And that's something I need to work on. And I'm very blessed in the fact that I have the partner I have, because I've shared this with her, obviously, and she helps, and she'll notice when I'm kind of like that. And because she is amazing in social environments, and like I can easily just sit back and watch her walk around a room,
work a room, yeah.
Dude, she's you guys know I can go on. I'm smitten with her. I can go on for hours.
That's good, man.
But she will see what's going on and come get me or come sit with me or whatnot, right? And address it and kind of be that support.
Yeah.
I also unfortunately use her as a stress ball because her hand, she knows it. She'll feel it, and she knows like that my anxiety is building in an environment. Yeah. And one aspect of that though, and something that I'm working on, right, is one, that transparency and talking about it really does help, but also realizing that, okay, I'm anxious. And I think going back to our patients and dealing with, like, say that angry patient, realizing, okay, I'm anxious in this moment. This is anxiety happening. I have to sit with this feeling and not necessarily running away from it, or not necessarily trying to be like, all right, how can I resolve this feeling and not feel this way?
Yeah.
But being like,
understanding what it is.
Yeah. Just being, okay, so I'm in a situation, like, the way I get over that situation, I love that you turn that into a counterstatement. But like, for me personally, the way I get through that situation is, cool, okay, so I'm in an environment that's new. I don't know 90% of these people. I'm uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And just blankets, I'm uncomfortable right now. This is what it is. Yeah. Because anxiety, like I said, it sucks ass. It's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think a lot of people feel anxious when they're in a social situation with a lot of new people. And so that's understandable. But what's a skill that can be built is, can you sit with the anxiety and still do what you need to do? Maybe you're at like some kind of business thing and you do need to talk to people. You need to force it. Even for me as an introvert, sometimes I have to force myself to sort of make conversations and network a little bit, even though it's uncomfortable. So can I sit with the anxiety, sort of compartmentalize it and keep it in its place where it's not, where I'm aware of it, but I'm not letting it affect my behavior too much. So that's like kind of a mindfulness skill almost, I think.
And also where you're not alone in it.
So it is useful in certain situations to sit with your anxiety because there's nothing you can do about it. Working in our environment, when there is something that's potentially dangerous that might pop off, or like when we have no choice but to be anxious in that moment, that's a situation where we just have to sit with it. I saw a light bulb go off for you though.
There's something I thought of. Yes, I kind of blanked for a minute, but I think that's where a lot of the comfort comes from, is that we are not alone with anxiety. It's like the same as like insecurities, right? Everybody has some insecurities. I mean, I would stretch to say that, but everybody has some sort of insecurities, and most people and most people that we would look at, you hear it all the time. You look at someone, whether they're famous or whether
like
it's
a model,
someone that we
looks perfect,
idolize, that they don't have any insecurities when they do, or they might have more than you do. But it's the same with like anxiety. It's like trying to remind yourself or remind myself that everybody in this room may be anxious at this point, but at least it deals with anxiety.
Yeah.
Everyone in those social environments, they might be dealing with the same same level of anxiety, just not, you know.
Yeah, nobody's perfect. Most pretty much you're feeling some anxiety and you're in a room full of people, you can probably look at and find several people who also are having anxiety, and that can be a reassuring thought. And then another way to remind yourself that you're not alone is talk to the people in your life. And like some people are very isolated, and social isolation can be really harmful for people. So, I mean, obviously, like I could give a whole speech about like, if you feel socially isolated, there are some here are some steps you can take, but that could be construed as kind of preachy, and not everyone has a lot of control over the situation. But at least at the hospital, when I'm having a stressful day, I'll just go and vent to some of my coworkers, be like, you know, when I have a moment when someone can sort of switch out with me and they can sit on the unit, and I can go inside the nurse station and maybe just take a few minutes or just a minute, you know, 30 seconds even sometimes is helpful. Just talk to someone, be like, man, this is tough. This is stressing me out. And then I'll usually get like, yeah, this is stressful. Like, you're doing a great job. And then I feel a little better. So that helps a lot.
It all kind of goes to that transparency.
Yeah, the transparency, and then just like not being stuck alone in your head. Like the instant I sort of get it out of my head and let people in and get that validation, it does kind of ease the pressure. That makes me feel less anxious.
That's one. I think it is amazing that like just having the groundings of a companion, it helps so much. I mean, that's the big thing with like support animals, right? Just having that grounding, and I think it's amazing. Like talking about anxiety, right? So like I deal with it daily. And I don't have licensed, and I have animals, right? I have a pet, I have a dog and a cat at home, and it's crazy because if you want to watch anxiety, if you want to watch like anxiousness flow between things, have a dog, because like he helps me in so many ways. And it's not always reducing the anxiety, right? Because like I think one misconception, and you know, obviously feel free to correct me. But I do believe one, in my opinion, one misconception about support animals, emotional support animals, is that they relieve the anxiety, or they take the anxiety,
eliminate it.
Or they take it away.
I think it's a reminder that someone's there.
It's you're not alone. You have support, and you have the untethered love. Unconditional, untethered love of somebody. The other one is its awareness. Like my dog, when I'm walking, right, Calvin, he's a shepherd mix, but like he's naturally responsive to the environment, especially when we have him on lead, right? So when we have him on a leash, it's like his work clothes. Like he's like, oh shit, okay. So he's really responsive to new stimuli coming into our environment. When he's off leash, the homie is just sniffing and walking all day long, right? But his behaviors tell me my behaviors. Like if he is being hyper reactive and he cannot settle down and all this other stuff, it's because I'm passing that energy to him.
I can
watch it when I'm really anxious. And because we were talking about like, right, like hypersensitivity is part of that anxiety,
hyper awareness,
hyper awareness. And that's the other thing. Like even the other day at work, there was situations that happened where I've been ruminating on it. Now it happened a week and a half ago. I'm still ruminating on it, and I almost reached out to the people that were affected through things, and taking it on me when it wasn't, right. But I wanted to reach out and take care of, I guess, resolve it or take care of the situation when it has already been resolved. It's already been taken care of. We're moved on by it, but I'm still ruminating about it. And with Calvin, when I'm in those phases, I can tell because him and I are very attuned to each other, and he reacts to that behavior. And then when I can be, and I reflect on that, and I'm like, oh, you're acting this way because you are feeding on my energy. So if I take a moment, reflect on it, sit with it, and breathe with it, and let it out, he will start calming down. And it helps. It's that mindfulness. It helps. It helps. I think that's where the elimination of the anxiety, it's bringing the awareness and causing you to be mindfulness of your energy because of their energy.
Yeah, I love how you put that too, because I, not only for my own dog, but the relationship, you know, like because it's been that transparent, like it's very similar, like you and Kenna, where, hey, I will be sitting there. We'll even be watching a movie, and I'll be fidgeting like nuts. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like my leg will be moving. I'll be spinning my ring, whatever, and she'll just come and she'll just like touch my hand or just grab my hand, and it just kind of like it makes me mindful of my anxiety and my behaviors dealing with it, and then it just kind of washes a lot of that away.
That's where you're fidgeting. Yeah,
that's a really good thing.
The one aspect that we haven't brought up yet that I do want to touch on before we get out of here.
Yep.
Because it's sitting in the back of my head. We are talking about, so far throughout this episode, we've been talking about our day-to-day anxiety, right? And what would I guess be, or not guess, but what would, if we were to go sit down with a psychiatrist and be actually, get the diagnosis, like I have a diagnosis of general anxiety disorder, right? That's essentially what we've been talking about this whole episode, is that aspect of it.
Persistent anxiety that it's always there, never goes away.
Yeah. And there are other aspects, right? Like of anxiety. And it's not definitionally a spectrum disorder like autism and other things, but there is just like everything, there's a spectrum of how people's anxiety presents and what situations. The one aspect and this is what really started bringing awareness that I was like, oh, I need to do some self-reflection here, is I never had full-blown anxiety attacks, right? Until, again, sobriety. And then life stressors, like I started school, I was doing it on my own. I was doing 2 degrees at the same time, working 2 full-time jobs, doing internships. Like, dude, I was maxed out, bandwidth out, right? And what would blow my mind is there was times where I had full-on crippling anxiety attacks. To me, if I reflected on the moment, there was no cause or reason for it. Like, there's one day, I vividly remember it, and it was the first time where McKenna and I like had to be like, oh, okay, so this is a thing that we are now dealing with in our life. I had gone to class all day. I had done a bunch of work and stuff, and then I went to work out because I knew I had I had a couple papers to do and some other shit. So I knew I had a busy night, and to relieve the stress, relieve the anxiety, I work out. And that's how I relieve a lot of my anxiety, is through athletics. Right. And so I went and worked out for an hour or 2, and I got home, showered, did a bunch of my stuff, and I go to sit at my desk and I put my hands on my laptop. And the feeling of just numbness throughout my entire fingers started, and then my breath, and I was like trying to catch it. I was like, oh, because once you deal with anxiety, everybody knows like what's coming, right? Yeah. You're like, oh, I got to take a deep breath. It's going to be okay. I just got to get my breathing under control. Nope. Next thing I know, dude, I'm on the ground, like all lights off in the house, because like any stimulation, not good. So I went and turned all the lights off, and I just like took a seat and like laid on down. And we didn't have my dog yet, but my cat. We were like, dude, he is the coolest cat ever. But when I used to have panic attacks, like I was just explaining, this was the first time where we're like, oh shit, he's actually like really interest. Like there's a connection here. Yeah. Because when I did that, what he did was he would come up from then on. If I'm having a full blown attack, he will come up and lay on my chest and just chill with me, right? Yeah. And now that we have Calvin, what he does, he's an 80-pound little rocket. He will sit on my lap and like lay on me like a weighted blanket and wrap his neck around. Like he will like cover me. And
that's cute.
It's adorable. And it's also the most comforting thing where you're like, and going back to the points we were bringing up. And the only reason I wanted to bring, not the only reason, but one of the big reasons I wanted to bring this up, and the fact of like deeper anxiety attacks, is the points we've been talking about all connect to it, where like it's the connection that I'm not alone. I'm not going through this by myself, that even these beautiful animals that we just chalk up as pets, they are so intelligent and they're so in tune to what we as their owners and as their family, like we are their pack, we're their family, are going through, and they just want to help. Right? Like the same feelings that we have at work. They just want to help us. And it's almost instantaneous. When one of my pets does that, the feeling that I am safe, that I'm not alone, that that I can get through this instantly hits me. Yeah. It's wild. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, being isolated definitely makes it way harder to manage anxiety. So reaching out to loved ones, having pets, being with pets, very important. Definitely helps me to clarify my thoughts too when I talk about it with other people. Then when I write things down, it sort of is there. It's concrete. It's already written down on the page, so it's out of my head on the page. And if I'm ever wondering, like, hey, what do I think about this thing? I can just look at the note and it's there. And then the last piece for me is once I've written it down, now anytime that thought comes up, I just have to recognize it and remind myself, no, I already know what I think about that. I don't need to keep thinking about it because I've already come to a conclusion. And that is a mindfulness practice that definitely takes training, therapy. Having a therapist helps, because when you're consistently working with the counter statements, then when the thought comes that requires a counter statement, you're trained to just sort of go immediately to it, and then you can push it out of your mind. But then pushing it out of your mind, keeping it out of my mind so it doesn't increase my anxiety, that also takes some discipline. So yeah, there's a lot of aspects to it, but I think the most important thing is what you're talking about, which is not like, and you too, just like not staying alone, not just keeping it all in, not reaching out to people. Like the healthy relationships are one where there's communication about like about feelings. So going in both directions.
With your coping skill, do you essentially now just have a space in your house where you have a bunch of journals?
I mean,
do you keep those journals?
Yeah, so I have three ways. If it's during the daytime and like I don't mind looking at my phone screen, I'll write it I have a journal in my phone. If it's in the evening or like if I'm free, I'm like at home and like I don't have a time constraint, I do have another journal, a paper journal. And if it's late at night and all my lights are already off and I'm doing my yoga or whatever and I have that thought, I will just rip a page out of the notebook so I don't have to look closely. I'll just write it in big ass letters on the notebook. So I actually have several pieces of paper that I just kind of keep on my desk that are like reminders of things that like I've decided to work on.
That's really cool. And I'm asking because like I'm legitimately like I think I'm going to attempt.
Okay.
I think you should
to use that because it sounds so helpful. It really does. My other question for that, Gregory, is because I know you were just saying that once you have a counter statement, you move on, you don't rewrite.
Again, I'm not a therapist. I don't really know what I'm talking about, but I've been in therapy, so this is just something.
Well, and this is what works for you.
Yeah, it does work. It works for me.
And I want to find out if it works for me.
Cool. Yeah,
right.
It does.
And that's what we're doing. Right. That's what we're here for. Is we are just sharing what we've come across, what we've seen, what we deal with, and offering it. But we're not telling anybody this is how you need to do it.
Different aspects, different ways that we've processed.
Yeah. And if it works for you, it works for you. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
Did I throw you off a question?
No. What my question is though is I know you were saying that when you have a counter statement, you know you came up with that, so you don't revisit it. Is there ever a time you edit or like you come up with a new counter statement where so if a situation keeps arising, right? Do you continue to be like, nope, came up with that counter statement, push it out, or do you revisit it, see what you wrote,
like there's more to it?
Yeah, and update it.
Actually, the counter statements I've developed with therapists or by myself, they tend to work. They tend to be pretty good. So, I mean, there's two in particular. There's one that I say to myself consistently now, and then there's another one that I remember that really helped me get over something back in the day, and I haven't had to change them. No, because they worked. They kind of like are straight to the point.
Way cool.
Yeah,
well, I really appreciate you sharing what you found that worked for you.
Thanks,
you know
man.
what I mean? I think that's really cool.
I'll tell you one thing. I'm a little less anxious just after this conversation.
Oh, good. Glad to hear that.
Me too.
I did. I learned a lot from you guys.
Yeah, I feel good.
I would share that sentiment. And moving forward, I hope y'all take away a little something from the conversation, and that listening to us was a benefit to you. And I hope you all can go throughout the rest of your day and your weeks till next time and reflect or anything. And we would love to hear what y'all, our listeners, have come up that helps you.
Please leave comments, questions.
Leave comments, questions. If you guys have any articles you want us to check out that you think would be really beneficial to talk about on this platform, we'd love to see them. We'd love to read them. We really do love reading all the comments from you guys. We are working toward getting back to everybody who has commented. We you guys are all heard, and we appreciate the connection. That being said, also through this conversation and everything, and also this month is an awareness month.
Yep.
And it's on a pretty serious topic, right? So, and I think anxiety feeds into that topic. So if you have loved ones too, just reach out to them. Like we were talking about, that connection really helps. And
hell yeah.
just we're not always looking for advice. Be a soundboard.
Yeah.
Just be there, reach out, let them know that they're not alone, and be there for your friends. But that being said, we really, really appreciate everybody who listens. Please,
we do.
If you guys like our content, if you guys want to see more or hear more, please hit those subscribe buttons on any of the platforms you use: YouTube, Spotify, Apple.
Like
Google.
our post on Facebook, throw some likes, throw some subscribes, share the content,
and hit those notification reminders so you guys get our latest updates.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
We look forward to connecting with all y'all and sharing some more time with you guys.
Unzipping our minds on the next topic. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, guys.
Cool. Thank you.
Thanks for listening.